We're back. How's your 420?
I'll let you know when I'm through it, but
What do you,
I've got quite the supply ready.
what do you mean? We're taping this. I mean, we're not taping this. This is live and direct on a Saturday morning, so
So
should
you
have
want me to
known how
tell
your
you how my
420
420 was?
No? Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, what do you have planned for 420? Maybe you should tell the audience what is 420 for those of you who don't know what 420 is and why it is every single holiday wrapped in one for you.
Well, since developing the Afro-Canada Bud Sisters and my alter ego, Miss Weed Wiki, 420 has taken on an entirely new meaning. Honestly, I had never celebrated it before, despite using cannabis pretty regularly for the last 3-4 years. Matter of fact, I hadn't even heard of 420 before maybe 2012, 2013.
Okay.
And when it was described to me, it sounded alien. Like, it just, I think because of my exposure to cannabis had been in kind of, Caribbean or Jamaican circles, 420 just didn't seem to jive with what my image and impression of cannabis and cannabis culture was.
So it's more of a Pineapple Express stoner
Exactly.
culture. Right.
And whereas for me, my stoner culture is, hip hop movies and, if you smoke enough to make it through Soul on the Plane. I mean, Snakes on the Plane. Soul Plane, Snakes on the Plane. They're both bad.
That sounds like a double feature. Soul
Not-
Plane. So anyway,
Are you going to defend Soul Plane?
no, I'm not. But there's this thing where at some point in my son's life, he just thought old black people were so funny, and he just used to laugh at them. So I just remember that particular one. I think John Witherspoon was in it, and he was just killing himself laughing. Anyway, I digress. So, anything specifically that you're doing, or
Well,
in terms of events, or
I'll be doing an IG live with my biz partner Natalie of Growing with Natalie, and because she just finished her 2-year horticulture program.
Okay, right on.
She went back to school at age 50 to
Never
get
too
her
late.
college diploma in horticultural technician. So
okay.
yeah, we'll be doing a 420 sesh and just talking about, what we want to do next for women in cannabis and normalizing cannabis for Black women across the country.
Okay. So, I think that is a perfect segue to one of the things we're talking about today, because you're talking about stigma of cannabis in society. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the stigma of mental health in the Black community, getting help, going into therapy, what that looks like, because I think there's definitely a disconnect in terms of our community. And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this was last week when, Shalice was here and we kind of started talking about Insecure, when there was that episode where Nathan just disappeared.
Yes.
And, he came back and he said, look, I was going through problems, anxiety, depression. And then, she lost it. And, one of the things I was saying to Shalice was, well, it feels like mixed messages, right? Like you want men to become emotional and be emotionally available. But when we tell you that, we were going through stuff, then we get ripped. And Shalice corrected me in saying, well, where he went wrong was he didn't communicate to her that he was going through. So, but, that kind of had me thinking about, we need to have a conversation about that. And what I wanted to do was have a conversation talking about, and I'll let you share at May in terms of what you want to share to relate to it. But it was more, I wanted to share it in terms of awareness for the community, but also to talk about my journey and how I arrived there, because I think I arrived there in a very kind of up and down way. And it took me a while to get there, but I finally got there, and I think it's really good. I think that mental health, or self-care, or taking care of yourself is one of those things that was always perceived in the Black community as, we're too busy working, and we're too busy having 2 and 3 jobs. We have real problems. We have threats from external predators out there. And white people have time to go to therapy because they have so much time on their hands. So they can just kind of, worry about their dogs and yoga, as Common says, and then focus on that. So I think, with that, we always thought that it was a luxury to go to therapy, right? So, before you, like, what are your earliest recollections of hearing about therapy, and what were your kind of initial thoughts in terms of what that meant for the Black community and to, a larger extent yourself?
Thank you. That's actually a great question. I don't think we can talk about therapy without talking honestly about mental health and mental illness.
Right.
Our community, through the vestiges of colonialism, slavery, and being uprooted and put here, we are the last or very low on the totem pole to access mental health resources. So we get diagnosed last, we get misdiagnosed, but our history with psychiatry and mental health support in North America isn't the greatest. And I'm
Right.
speaking from being a multi-generational Canadian and growing up hearing stories of my great-grandmother having shock treatments
Whoa.
at the Douglas Institute, it's the Douglas Institute now, but it was called the Douglas Mental Hospital
Right,
in
right,
Montreal.
right.
And my cousin to this day still remembers going to visit our great grandmother. Would have been before I was born, but she remembers how haunting that building was. That's the thing too with mental illness. Historically, we would be associated with being, held against our will, or public breakdowns requiring intervention.
Right.
And so that probably would make us want to misdiagnose or avoid getting small issues addressed until they get bigger, until we get to crisis. I also think with all the socioeconomic pressures and adding availability of illegal and drugs, and I'm not talking about cannabis, I'm talking about even the drugs that were used to escape
Right.
what we're going through,
Right.
self-medicating, all those things are giving us ways to avoid dealing with the core issues.
Okay.
But personally, my exposure was through when my parents were splitting.
Okay.
So when they were splitting, I was a teenager and my brother was 5 years younger, around 8, 9 years old. So we had to go through court-mandated counseling sessions for that stuff.
Right.
And I'll be honest, my takeaway from it wasn't good, because I went in thinking, I was led to believe I was going to do it for them to determine who I should live with. And, I was 14. I was able to articulate, I want to live with my father. I want to live with my father. These are the reasons why. And that same psychologist delivered a report recommending I live with my mother.
Whoa.
So I felt violated. I felt like nobody was listening.
Like your agency got taken away.
Completely,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because I was under the impression it was for one thing. And now, 40 years, 30 years later, I can understand in family law situations, my mother was paying with her lawyer for a report to support her position for custody. It was never about getting me actual help to transition through this type of
Right.
family transition. It was to leverage in a custody battle. So I think we have to be honest about, as a community, when we get exposed to therapy, it's after traumas, it's after crisis. So it's kind of hard to want to go seeking it if you think you're not in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
We're so used to putting out fires, right?
Yeah, and I think that, just kind of as I was thinking about this kind of episode and kind of what that looked like, growing up in the Bahamas, was there was always this saying that if you had a nervous breakdown, and we talked about a nervous breakdown, but we talked about it in the concept of you had a nervous breakdown to where you snapped. Like when I heard a nervous breakdown, I didn't know what it was. It was like, did somebody wig out? Like, what did that mean? And all that meant was, somebody then obviously wasn't diagnosed as clinical depression, but, they got to that point where it's just like everything just shut down.
Yeah.
They're in bed, nothing can kind of help them from that. And and as I kind of went through my journey of understanding what depression is, the different levels of depression, then I started to think about my mom, and I started to think about those were the days where she could not get out of bed. Like,
Right.
she used to have those depression naps, and people used to come over and help,
Yeah.
just because, and just not understanding that, right?
Right.
Because we thought she didn't feel well, and attaching feeling well to physically not feeling well, but not, the mental aspect of that. And I think that, as, and one of the things I really wanted to talk about in terms of that is then there's that stigma that it's just women, right? Even within the community. And until, my dad passed, I was, going through his stuff and cleaning out his stuff. And I came across some correspondence that he had with my kid sister. And he talked about, and I never kind of thought like there was mental illness there with him or depression or anxiety. And he was not one who kind of emoted or expressed kind of thing, but he was closest to her, and he was saying, I feel so lonely, I feel so alone, I feel so depressed, I feel, so in the last years of his life, I'm reading this and I'm like, this is crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, but then something dawned on me to be like, okay, like automatically I thought like, okay, does that mean now both of my parents are like that? I gonna get the double whammy? Am I gonna pass it on to my kid? What does that look like? And I think, for me, when I knew that I needed to go and talk to somebody was, at a certain point in my life, I was like, work was a stressor, money was a stressor, making sure that my son got into a good school, making sure that I paid for that. Money was always a stressor for me. And I always tied what I was going through to like something functional. And when I got to the point where everything was fine, I got the job I wanted. I went to sleep and woke up for the first time, not even thinking about money.
Yep.
He was in the school that he wanted to be in. Everything was paid, and I still felt like that. And when I looked around and I was like, wait a minute, everything is the way I wanted it to be, and I still feel like that. Kind of that was where it was like, okay, I need to go and kind of talk to somebody. So I wanted to talk to you about the selection of a therapist and what were some of the criteria. And I'll follow on with it in terms of the stuff that I went through. But I wanted you to set the stage in terms of maybe talking about the different therapists you had, what worked, what didn't, what were you looking for, and kind of coming out of that, what was the right fit for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think over the years, I would go to therapy when I would be dealing with depression, like major depression, lost motivation, or an inability when I felt my function was deteriorating. I'm very used to being so high functioning that when it's off, it's really off.
Yeah.
And living 4 or 5 hours away from my parents, they weren't my mental village, if I'm being honest.
Right.
So when crises happen, I'd go to a therapist. Now, let's be honest, in my 20s, I didn't make the money that I make now. So access to therapy was pretty limited. It was either through work programs, which were starting to come out in the mid 90s, late 90s, or through like the region, say Region of Peel. You could go through family services and they would give you a scaled rate. I learned too that I had an issue with social workers because my mother was a social worker.
Right.
So I would have a natural like reluctance because of my own biases based on my relationship with my mother. It made it an extra block for me to go through. But I think depending on what you're going for the therapy for, your needs, they become more refined as you get older, such that I found later I knew what kind of therapist I wanted. I wanted someone that was going to make it easier for me to relate things to without me having to explain the whole story.
Right.
And that's part of what
Just like
made
from a
me,
cultural context, for
and
instance.
that's exactly
Yeah.
why about 2 years ago, I became intentional about finding a Black therapist. And the Black therapist for the reasons of relatability.
Yeah.
During the when R. Kelly's, that documentary was coming out,
Yep.
I happened to be going to therapy at the same time, and I was really, really struggling with the community response, and the defending of him. And my therapist was white. She was probably about my age, but she was white, blonde, blue eyes. And she looked at me like, why is this bothering you so much?
Right.
I consider myself a pretty good communicator. And if it was taking me so much effort to explain to her why it bothered me, there's better ways to spend my money. And that was a psychologist at $250 an hour.
Right.
When I decided I wanted to go with a Black therapist, I said, okay, I will open the gamut. I will remove my issues with, designations like social worker versus,
Right.
because budget matters too. And, you can get a registered social worker for half or maybe two-thirds of the price that you would pay.
Yeah.
For a psychologist. But the relatability matters, but also the issues you're trying to push through. And if you have deeper issues, maybe a social worker through your EAP or at $140 won't be enough. Maybe you do need a psychologist. Maybe you need a psychiatrist with medical support, like medication support.
Yeah.
But I really don't think enough is provided to us as a community because of socioeconomics and also our cultural issues with therapy and being upfront about mental illness that we can't even discern it.
Yeah.
Either we're in crisis and we're going to take the first little thing that is thrown at us, or, we got to get talked into it, right? So I think as a community, we can even benefit from getting educated on the different types of quality of therapy out there, whether, and to distinguish the kind of problems you should go to your work EAP program for versus the kind of problems you should go to for a psychologist or a psychotherapist, like something a little higher. There's things that are great for support groups, whether it's grief counseling, whether it's, survivor groups, things like that.
Yeah.
Through Bud Sisters, I didn't even realize it, but through lockdowns and because we were really trying hard to promote connecting and mental health support with each other, we organically developed a peer support group.
Right.
Where the same 15, 12 women every week would talk, just hold space. And it was just all we had in common is we were Black women, and we smoked.
And I think to your point in terms of, when you get to that level of, the therapist piece, you talked about the connection with your mom being a social worker and your aversion to that.
Yep.
I think for me, it was, growing up, like, when I was a young age, I don't want to do the whole, I was gifted, but I was bored in school. I did very well. And there was just that I was just like, okay, this is not stimulating me at all. And I remember I would stare out the window, just staring at the window and wish I was like, sci-fi on a different planet and just doing stuff on a different planet. And, the teacher would observe it and, talk to my mom and, my dad, he just wasn't involved. Very, I'm the provider. And she was like, hey, we need to take him to see something. So it was like, it wasn't something in the middle. It was the overreaction or the over-indexing, or you're being ridiculous in terms of this. So, when I, went to, my first therapist at that age, the person that I watched a lot of movies. So I was just like, I was just going to goof off with this, So when he did the Rorschach test, I would say the weirdest things ever. And then he stopped it short and he's like, there's nothing wrong with this boy. He knows exactly what he's doing. But then as I got older, my mom, who, was physically, emotionally, mentally abused by my dad, wanted to ensure that I didn't become the same way, and I broke the circle. So if she then started to see, me being a teenage boy, and teenage boys are the way they are, like that was a red flag for her, right?
Yeah.
And, she then said, hey, I think he needs to go talk to somebody because I'm, again, there was an over indexing. She was projecting.
Right.
But then my dad was like, because there's that feeling of the stigma, like he literally said, I don't want this on any of his medical records. I don't want this on any of his transcripts. I don't want that to be something that holds him back. He's already going to be held back because of, his race or whatever. So, and the thing about it is, I was listening to both of them, but when I went in, then I had a black female therapist, and I was a complete dick with her, right? Like, just because to me, and that was my rebellious phase too. So it was like, you weren't going to tell me how to be or whatever, right? And then she like cut it short, and she's like, no, like that's not going to happen. So going into the therapy thing, and when I was like kind of thinking through it, like up to that point, because I'm a sales guy, I was sitting there thinking, okay, if I talk to a therapist, why would they necessarily make me better, right? And when I was in university, it was like I was, reading a lot of Freud and negative therapeutic theory, to where it's like, if you're in therapy, you could create more problems or expose more things. And then I'm just like, well, if I'm a therapist, I'll make sure you stay in my chair and by my pool, right? And I like, so like, what was like in terms of your initial piece, like going in, when you were like, what are the things that you were looking for going in?
Yeah.
And then like now, can you take us through how that evolved?
So from when I first went to therapy
Yeah.
versus now, when I first went to therapy, I took whatever anybody gave me. So I wasn't discerning at all.
All right.
I listened to Sway in the morning religiously on satellite radio when I used to commute. And one day he was doing an interview, and I don't remember who his guest was, but they were talking about the importance of therapy and how he had just started going to a therapist for the first time in his life.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that it was a therapist who was an older black man. And it was like he said, conversationally, he realized he was getting conversations he thought he would have gotten from his father had he grown up with him.
Right.
And it touched a
Interesting.
nerve to me because I realized I wanted to find someone that was going to give me the wisdom, not just the critical thinking and the self-awareness that I needed, but the wisdom to see what life is going to look for me years down the line, right? Like the things that I'm freaking out over now,
Right.
I know that I'm going to have a better time believing the credibility of a black woman who's been through it versus a white woman who's making me explain why everything bothers me.
And as I was kind of going through my selection process, I definitely I eliminated a white woman or a white man, because I was like, I'm gonna have to explain too much,
Yeah.
right? Especially that extra layer of a West Indian family.
Yes.
And trust me, growing up in the West Indies in a West Indian family, I know that I'm gonna get grief for this, is very different than being born in Canada and being raised in Canada
I'll
with
say
the
it.
West Indian family. Yeah, you know
I have a different upbringing.
yeah.
and-
So
yeah.
it's a different feel. So for me, then it got into, all right, well, I can either talk to a black male or I can talk to a black female. And then I was like, well, if I talk to a black male, a lot of the stuff that I'm dealing with in terms of my challenges are relationships, right? So I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be able to talk and that have a male gaze, or there could be confirmation bias, or there's double down. But then again, I didn't want to talk to a black female because they might have been judgmental or,
okay.
whatever. So I was just in this like paralysis situation to where I had to unstick myself. So, what I did was, went on to Psychology Today, and they have like, the list of all the therapists. And, I started clicking on them and calling them, and they were like, yeah, I don't do these days. I can't do these days. I'm not seeing anybody now. And then I finally connected with one, and, she said, when can you come? And I was like, well, I work, and, I'm going to be all spun up from work. And she usually used to have hers like during the week. And then she said to me, what days work for you the best? And I said, you know what? Saturday mornings. And she's like, okay, you know what? My daughter's at soccer on Saturday mornings. I'll drop her off, come back to the office. So that for me was like, okay, she's actually bending the universe,
Yeah.
for me. And the way it's been is like totally different from what I thought it was going to be, because she does not, we think of, somebody who's helping a therapist as, they sit and listen and they take notes and you're on a couch. And it's totally different. Like, we're engaging, we're having good conversations. You can see where there's a thread. And then she's just kind of picking off the branches, kind of just stripping everything down, but in a very constructive way, not in a deconstructive way. And, I found that, when, and she said to me, and I don't know if she's just saying it to me, she's like, you're my best student. Because, when she would give me something to think about, it wouldn't be like, oh, crap, I forgot to do my homework. I would come back and I would have like reams and reams on my phone of like the stuff that I had to work on.
Right.
But I found that what was refreshing about it is if she needs to call me on my shit, she'll stop me.
Yes.
Right? And she'll like, yeah, no. And it's okay that if she makes her face in a certain way if I said something, or she'll be able to pick up when I get all pensive or whatever, right?
Right.
But what I found is at the end of the day, she was fiercely protective of me. So when I got into a situation where I'm like, well, this person, blah, 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 she's like, time out. That's not about that person. This is about you and focusing on you, right?
Right.
So, like going in terms of your expectations of therapy, like, in terms of the traditional, what you see on TV, when you finally got to the point where it was, like I said, where it's really good for me, like, what did that feel like? What did that look like for you?
Freeing. It felt very liberating because it's just, living in society where you're the minority, an invisible minority, you're used to always having to explain a little bit of further context, a little bit of background, and having a Black therapist alleviated that. Absolutely. On the other hand, and then there's the colloquialisms. Like if you say something, you don't usually have to explain, especially if they have a similar, Caribbean background or similar background to mine. I don't even have to explain figure of speeches, right? Like certain colloquialisms, I'll say, don't go over her head. Even cultural things, right? But also the challenge is, I think, when you have a Black therapist, they understand the cultural challenges in this society. Right? They understand it from their own lived experience, so they can apply that anecdotally. But also, it makes them able to call you on your shit and say, okay, now you're going overboard too, and to make you accountable for what you can be accountable for.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this, but, we're going to close off this segment. But, I would say the last time I spoke to my therapist, like one of the things she said, she was like, Arnold, I'm so busy. And I was like, as a salesperson, I'm like, that's a good thing. But as, Black person, I'm like, that's a good thing. Because she's like, this, if it's one thing that's come out of this pandemic, and it doesn't mean she was like taking advantage of the pandemic, but she's saying it has become a forcing function to where Black people are now, saying, I have to go get help. I need help. I'm spending all this time in isolation. So I'm really happy that it's happening, and I hope it continues to where if people get back to their normal lives, they're like, oh, I don't need this anymore. Like that then becomes, just part of a growth thing. So CK, shout out. I'm not going to call your name and put your government all in these streets. But thank you very much for everything you do for me. All right, so it's a little heavy, but I think it was a necessary conversation. So we're going to mix it up. I know that when Jay was in here talking about hip hop, you probably were cringing because you're like, oh, I want to talk about hip hop. So I wanted to give you the second block to talk about hip hop. I will say, and I've said this to you before, but you probably will deny that I've said it, but I will say that in terms of the expansiveness of hip hop, you know way more than me.
I am a little stunned.
Expansiveness.
I am stunned.
Expansiveness.
I'll take any part of it.
Depth in terms of certain groups. Right. So I'm just saying. That's it. So I wanted to do and I, people have probably seen these online, the 30-day challenges, to where you would post a song that would have evoke a different emotion or a different feeling. I personally could never do that because I gotta wait a whole month to tell you how I feel about music. Like, no, I'll just, here's my 30 right here. How I feel. So I wanted to do kind of a, well, we won't call it a lightning round, but just kind of throw some stuff out at you in terms of, some of your favorites. And I am triggered when we talk about top five because I don't talk about top five. Notice I talk about top three and then an honorable one, because I am triggered by that movie, which I thought was an absolutely horrible movie.
I love the movie.
Only to be outdone in its being horrible as Brown Sugar, which I think is one of the most bloviating movies ever and the most overhyped movie, not to mention, maybe because it had Elfin Tay Diggs, the Keebler Elf, the only black Keebler Elf, actually. So I just thought that movie could have been so much more, and it wasn't. But,
I could say the same about Belly.
oh my God, you really went there.
I mean, listen.
gonna go
The
super
opening
tangential.
scene
This
is
gonna go
amazing.
super tangential. Oh my God.
It's amazing, but the movie is not bearable. It did not hold up.
I'll wait till Shalice gets here so we can talk about black films.
So you can both gang
But
up on me.
I think people often put Brown Sugar in the category of Love Jones and Love and Basketball, and you can't.
No, it's not. It's not them. It is not in that category. I will agree. It's
There's
not.
no chemistry at all. It looked like she was dealing with somebody's son. Anyway, so
It was their second movie together. How could you say they had no
I don't know.
chemistry?
I don't know.
You didn't watch The Best Man?
oh, don't talk to me about that.
He has issues.
So,
Why don't
anyway.
you just say that your issue is Tay Diggs? Maybe he throws the movies for you.
Sure.
Okay. Well, that was too easy.
Only because we have time constraints that I have to agree. All right, so are you ready for your lightning round?
Yes.
All right, cool. So I am not going to necessarily interject myself in any of these because I would say some of these, like I started thinking about it and I was like, no, I don't know. So I'm gonna throw a couple out and you kind of tell me.
Okay.
So favorite remix to a track?
What was yours?
No, you can't do that.
Okay.
Like,
Scenario.
okay.
You know what? Let me walk that back.
I'm just listening.
No. Scenario was the first, but One More Chance, the remix, is
Okay.
still, and I say that because Scenario, as amazing as it is, the first one the original is great too. You get into the remix and then you hear, and if you haven't heard the original in a long time, you're like, oh my God, that's a great song too. Whereas I don't
remix
think
is good,
anybody wants to fight me and say One More Chance, the original was a great song. It was okay.
Yeah.
But the remix blew it out the park.
I think for me, and I had one, but don't put me on the spot like that because some of these I didn't even think about. But this one, I like the original, but when I heard the remix, I rather hear the remix, the Pete Rock version of House of Pain, Jump Around. I liked it.
No, it's good. It's good.
I didn't think the original was okay, but I just liked how Pete Rock smoothed it out.
No,
That's what he does.
Yes. He made it he remixed it down. Totally.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna throw a couple cities out. If you want to
Okay.
put another city, that's fine.
Yep.
Favorite track by an artist from Hotlanta or DMV. And for those of you who don't know DMV, it's not the Department of Motor Vehicles. It's, it's DC, Maryland, Virginia, that whole kind of triplex.
Yes.
So, favorite track by an artist or, of your choice.
Okay, so my favorite ATL artist, because I was so literal, was Elevators by Outkast. But my favorite group out of the DMV is Clips.
I'm not surprised, actually.
You're not?
No,
Oh,
I'm
well,
not.
no. You're right. Julian wouldn't even be surprised.
Yeah, I can't really. We need to have a whole conversation about Outcast because I'm so conflicted about them. I don't. I never got into them. I don't
Never?
know. They never clicked, and everybody just assumed because I was so avant-garde in terms of hip hop that it was like, oh yeah, Outkast. I mean, they have some that I'm just like, oh yeah, like got it, prototype, like love that song.
Right.
But it just never. It was never a hook. Now, I know I'm gonna. I favorite artist, favorite track by, I'm gonna say Kendrick. But I know who you're going to say to trigger me. But I'll say Kendrick, and then you insert whoever you want to after that.
You're not going to do yours?
No.
Okay.
I asked
All
you
right.
the question,
All
and
right.
then you
So
answer.
I went with. Okay, my favorite Kendrick is Money Trees.
That's a good song.
Yeah. Although
That's a good
swimming pools. You know why? Because Money Trees, I rap to it. Like, there's very few songs I rap
Issa
along.
Rae?
No, well, yeah, okay, maybe. And with Money Trees, like, I even cock my finger like there's a
Oh,
gun
Lord.
and everything. It's weird how it comes over me.
I hope you don't do that at a stop sign when
No,
somebody pulls up
no.
next to you.
But when the one comes up, no. But my favorite track by Drake.
Who?
Yeah.
What? You didn't even let me finish with my Kendrick one.
Oh right, go.
So, one that a lot of people don't know about, but like Black Boy Fly is like one of those songs where it's like every time I hear it, it's so sad. It's such a sad song and it moves me in a certain way. But I think These Walls, just in terms of the beat, just in terms of, the imagery that he's using, the double entendres that he's using is like a really good song. And if you listen to Dissect in terms of the podcast, you will hear what that song is really about.
Oh, okay.
And that song is literally about the guy who killed his friend, gets put away in jail, and he goes and has sex with the guy's girlfriend.
Oh. Okay.
So, and it's all kind of pieced together. But anyway, go ahead with this Drake nonsense.
Would you
Jesus
stop?
Christ. I'm not going to have a point of reference, but maybe the one fan out there that
Would you stop? There's
stumbled
more than one
upon this
fan.
Indeed.
And they're not all just women, but I know you're going to try to say they are.
Yeah.
Replacement Girl. And I think it's simple. It's because Replacement Girl isn't even his track, it's Trey Songz. But he does the rap over it and he sings a bit too. And Dreams Money Can't Buy, which wasn't actually released on an album. So I like Drake's most undercover stuff more, underground stuff. But yeah.
So I'll make a Drake connection with Kendrick.
Oh.
Poetic Justice.
I knew, well, that would have been the only one.
Yeah, but he actually rips Kendrick on that track. He showed up. He showed up for that track because he knew he had to match greatness. So that was that one shining moment in time where he was elevated and Kendrick brought out the best in him.
Sure.
But hey, as they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. So I will give him his shining moment in time.
You still owe me, eh? Like you owe me an afternoon of Drake
Nope,
to
not happening.
convince you.
Never happening. Kanye, I know you're conflicted with Kanye. I'm not conflicted with him as it relates to his artistry. But
I'm not at the must throw his stuff out yet.
okay.
I was near it. I was getting very close with the Trump stupidness. And
Oh, I thought you were
the
going to say it
church-
until he divorced Kim.
No, that's his mess. I try not to use people's relationships against them because, we all don't make great choices, right?
Okay.
But, nah. Hey, Mama.
Okay.
Hey, Mama still makes me happy. It's my mama song. Like, I even played that at my wedding when I danced Wizzy. So.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I can't tell me nothing.
Oh, that's such a good one.
I literally want to run through the wall when I hear that. That song makes me so hyped when I hear that, because just how it drops, just how the beat drops, and the lyrics that he uses in there is just one. Did you think of one you wanted to
No,
replace?
you said hype. Now I just gave you my favorite
we're
Kanye,
getting
but
there
in terms of the
hype.
hype one, crack music. I loved crack music by him.
Okay. Well,
That was a hype song.
if we're gonna talk about hype songs, I would say "Addy Up"
Oh,
is one that I want to fight. I physically want to put paws on somebody every time I hear that
more
song.
than you don't know?
Yeah, yeah. And like even when I see the Sesame Street version, though YouTube, I still want to fight. It's like it doesn't calm me down at all. But anyway, that was fun. I'm gonna go super cheesy with this next question, but favorite track when the weather's nice.
Amory, Why Don't We Fall in Love?
You know what? That is a great song.
It's a
And
summer song.
I remember, but the thing about it is, when you said that, I remember when that song was out in the summer, and everywhere you went, you heard that.
Yes.
Every bar you went into, you heard that. No, that's a good song. Shout out to Amory. I can't even believe you actually said Amory, because you know my love for Amory. Second straight week, we're calling Amory in the podcast. Amory, give me a call. Other than that LL Cool J thing you did with Paradise, which is okay. Wasn't Gabrielle Union in that? I think she was in that video for Paradise.
I haven't watched an LL video since Love You Better.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to go super, super cheesy on this one, and it's very lazy, I will admit. Mm-hmm. But Summertime, I know, but you know what I like about it is the things that he was talking about, like that actually took me back to my teenagehood. Like cleaning your car before you go out, like that kind of stuff was like, yes, I actually did that kind of stuff, right? So it's a reminiscing track.
It's actually I would call it a textbook classic. It is completely relatable. It is accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Instrumentally, very good sample. Like it was done exquisitely. Like and that's why we're still talking about it. What, 30 years, 33 years later.
It's a good track. It'll
right?
It'll get you on the floor.
We will still run out to the floor, as would anybody else 20 years, 30 years from now.
It just has that cookout feel.
Yes.
By the way, I'm gonna say this for the record, and just because it's on Cellulite now, or whatever you want to call this, Jaden Smith is gonna end up being a better artist than Will Smith will ever be. I'm telling you.
Artist, I don't think that's too hard though. He kind of left early. Sorry.
So what do you? He'll even be a better actor.
Oh, if you want to say he'll be a better actor than
He'll
Will?
be a better everything. The kid is talent, and I think because he's quirky, people don't take him seriously. But he has an amazing voice. He has flow. He can rap. Anyway, check out his stuff.
Okay.
Julian turned me on to Jaden. So.
Okay. And I trust Julian.
Oh Lord. Right, because he likes cheesy.
And the Neptunes.
Who?
And the Neptunes. We get into
Oh
Neptunes
well,
too.
yeah. Well, I like the Neptunes too. I don't really have one on this, but favorite diss track?
You don't?
Not really. Not really. I wanna supply something else, but go ahead. Favorite diss track.
Jack the Ripper. LL Cool J. Yes. Jack the Ripper almost burned my ears off the first time I heard it in like 1988, 89. When did I'm That Type of Guy? It was the Walking with the Panther album. And when I heard it, you could hear who he was ripping. And I believe he still had that feud going with Ice-T and Kool Moe Dee. Yeah, it was searing for my like 14, 15-year-old ears.
Yeah, and I wonder now that I think about it,
it's still angry now. Like if you play that, it's still searing.
Yeah, I wonder if I didn't get into diss tracks because it wasn't the type of music that I listened to. Like I listened to De La Soul, I listened to Tribe Called Quest. They weren't kind of, Slum Village, Little Brother. They weren't kind of really dissing anybody, right? Like De La Soul a bit in terms of the industry and certain people. But yeah, it was never kind of a thing for me.
So no Vaseline never made you like, ooh,
No, because I wasn't a West Coast dude. Like my only West Coast group that I like is Farside.
You
So
didn't even like, what's it called? Do What You Like? Digital Underground?
I
Okay. No, I'm saying that because you liked Farside, but you didn't like Digital Underground.
I don't think they
which-
were the same.
No, I don't think you have a Farside without some Digital Underground out there.
I wasn't talking about anthology. I was just
I'm
talking
just
about
saying, like,
from a derivative standpoint. It could have been an evolution thereof.
maybe.
Anyway, I was gonna not replace it with a diss track, but thinking about the when I was talking about Drake on Kendrick's, I think the more popular one for that version was Eminem on Jay-Z
Jay-Z
Renegade.
Renegade.
Right? And I remember when I heard that the first time, even before anybody said, like, this was the track that, Eminem showed up for. And I do think people just get more elevated, more hype. Like,
Depending on their competition. Too.
right.
Yeah.
Because when Tyler did Smuckers, like, it was like him, Lil Wayne, and Kanye. Tyler did his bars. Wayne did his bars. Sorry, my apologies. Kanye did his bars first. Then he sent his bars to Tyler and Wayne. Then when they put it all together, he said nope, and he came back in the studio. He actually flew out there and actually did it again harder.
Well, you're bringing a great point. Let's talk about this because one of the questions was favorite group track, and we can't ignore the evolution of recording. In the 90s, think about your favorite group track, and I'm not talking about scenario. I'm talking about say Symphony. Symphony was one of the original, with Cool G Rap and Big Daddy Kane and everybody. Can you imagine today those kind of songs if they got to send their verses first?
Oh, yeah.
You get what I'm trying? The dynamic
Yeah, that's a great point.
makes it so different now. So that, for you, that Tyler song stands out in terms of contemporary hip hop. For me, Swagger Like Us. Oh my gosh. Swagger Like Us used to make me that was one of my football prep songs. And it was one of those where each verse progressively got grimier than the verse before. So
Right.
it was there's Kanye's, then you got Jay's, then you got T.I., then you got Wayne, and then T.I. just
But
and I'm
here's where
not
I'm
even
gonna-
a fan of T.I., and he was smooth on it.
But here's where I'm going to challenge you on that, though, because as I think about it, if Wu-Tang recorded today, to where they were all recording in that room, would that have been the same if everybody then did theirs separately or just send their bars in? Because I think that was a situation where they fed off of each other.
Well, I agree, but and Wu-Tang is a progression or an evolution of the symphony type of track, right? Without symphony, you don't really get into that. Let's throw bars, verse after verse after verse through many people. Who did we see do that before? Run DMC, really? It wasn't even always successful.
Yeah. Favorite interlude?
I'm not a big hip hop interlude fan. So mine was R&B. My choice was an R&B one.
If you say Jodeci, I'm shutting
Why?
this down right now.
Why?
Go ahead.
In her mission from the show, the after show, and the after party.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, if you listen to Ready to Die,
yes.
any interlude.
Including Stay Off the Phone, Stop Calling My Daddy, that one?
That was the funniest one. And I remember every time when you played a song, there were certain ones where you had to
turn it down because someone might hear something.
Turn it back up.
Like I said, I think, and that's exactly why. Hip-hop interludes, if you think about it, they either were, you'd have to turn them down or watch who was around you.
Yeah.
Or they were incredibly misogynistic. So they weren't, let's be honest, those interludes were never for me as a female listener, as a woman listener of hip hop.
Right.
Rarely.
Right. Which, I mean, has it really changed? But no, not really. I don't really have a reference with this one, but favorite track of favorite mixtape.
Oh, Best of Me, DJ Clue, the Maya and Jay-Z remix, because it's not an original track. It's a remix.
I don't know that one. You're going to have to look.
No, you do know it. Okay. I will play it for you. Okay. Best of Me. You'll know the song that Maya sings. In the video, she had on the Carolina blue t-shirt jersey, like a tank top jersey, and Jay-Z was behind her rapping. Yeah, the remix is not on the album. It's only on the DJ Clue mixtape.
Okay. I probably if I hear it. You still want to do the 3 features one? Because I guess I did the 2 features, but 3 features is a lot.
No, I mean, isn't that a group track, really? Like,
Yeah.
kind of just cover
Yeah,
it?
I guess. I would just automatically say anything Wolfgang, but
I
I'm
want to
biased.
hear your favorite simp track.
I don't have one. Like,
You've never liked a simp track?
what would be a reference point? I mean, to me, a simp track is anything common. Just put in a common song. And,
I Need Love was a simp track.
like I said, just put in anything common. And I as my female listenership, just craters.
Plummets. People women do not, tolerate Lonnie slander very well. Okay.
I
What is your favorite? So you don't have one? Mine is 21 Questions. Like,
okay.
yeah, 21 Questions. I would have a hard time not walking down the aisle to that song.
Oh Lord.
Okay. I haven't met anybody that's willing to let me, but like that's one of the most romantic hip hop songs to me.
So
I know you're so conflicted.
I'm trying to think now. A romantic hip hop song would be Bonita Applebaum, Tribe Called Quest, and Electric Relaxation. That I'm just saying, it's romantic. It has a nice feel. I know, Fife is talking about Siemens Furniture.
A simp track cannot be a "Let Me Sex You Down" track.
You were saying romantic. You had kind of gone to romantic. So is that what you meant, a romantic track or a simp track? Because then I just go back to common as a default.
Oh my god. Okay, so common's your default.
I guess you could tell me I'm hating on him now, right? This one's
It's
weird.
interchangeable for you,
This one's gonna be completely lazy that I'm gonna do, but no. I actually I don't have a reference point to this one. Favorite track that's over 8 minutes. But it has to be.
Can I give you
Kanye?
No, it's gotta not be a remix. Because I originally was gonna be a remix, and I'm like, no, you know what? I could do this without a remix.
So which one?
Smiling Faces by The Temptations. It's like 13 minutes.
Wait, is this non-hip hop? What?
What 8-minute hip hop song that's not a remix?
Okay, so if that's okay then. So if we're talking about that, I was talking. So
Okay.
it'd be George Clinton, not just Knee Deep.
Oh.
Just because
Okay.
I know it's just he goes on and on and on, but it's just one of those tracks that you could just put in and you could just leave it.
Okay.
So Jay was here and we talked about hip hop songs that changed the game or changed the game for you. So do you want to talk about, I'll give you the opportunity because you weren't here that time, but do you want to talk about maybe 3 tracks that, once you heard, you were like never the same, or, you knew that the game had changed in terms of hip hop? And if you say Ghetto Boys, I'm going to fight you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Mine's playing tricks on me.
It is
Great
such a
song.
seminal classic that I don't know how that isn't a game-changing song.
Mine's playing tricks on me?
Yeah?
It's a great song.
So why wouldn't it be a game changer?
I didn't.
Especially for the South.
I didn't. Yeah, well, yes, coming out of the South, of course. Yes, it was different then, but I just didn't. Yeah, I didn't hear it, and I'm like,
No?
it was a great song. It was a great beat. I mean, I would say
The storytelling and... No?
I don't think it was that much of a storytelling, but like I said, that's why I think Mobb Deep,
Right.
in terms of storytelling, had better storytelling
Yeah.
than Ghetto Boys. But
But I have to acknowledge too, you listen to lyrics, you're lyrics driven and meaning driven way more than I am. And I say that knowing that you can spout off lyrics off the top of your head easily. I do not. I'm a beats and then vibe and then I get into the lyrics as I keep repeating it.
I like lyrics, but and Julian and I often, like when we hear a song, we automatically have the three criteria. It's the beat, then the flow, then the lyrics for me.
Okay.
Like lyrics is always third.
Okay.
So, but yes, if it's there, then that's great.
Well, of course, yeah. Lyrics are third for you because you love Tyler, and Tyler's lyrics are.
But
I don't get
mean,
Tyler's lyrics.
yeah, you think about Tyler. But I mean, like, you know, for instance, Brendan, like he is a big flow guy, and you know that's why he never really liked, like when I liked Slum Village, he was like, yeah, but they suck in terms of flow.
Yeah,
but
they
I was
do.
like, yeah, but I knew they did, and I was like, they would have been a super group if they didn't have Botan and 3T. But I was like, the beats, it was like everything to me, and I find myself, if I hear a good beat, but like the flow is like crap, I'd be like, okay, I'll get through it.
But then you've just justified why you put up with Slum Village then, because and I'll say that
Yeah, for
because
sure. Because their lyrics
I
were horrible.
couldn't get into Slum Village. I tried, and I was like, I just can't get into Slum Village too hard. But Little Brother, which often
I
gets
was
compared
just
to
gonna
that,
say.
that is what happens when you get a group that does flow well.
Little
Their
Brother
flow.
was hard, and I you know, they still
And they play off each other, like they complement, their flows complement each other.
yeah, and
better than Slum Village did.
they still had a Brooklyn or Bronx feel,
Oh, they did not feel very North Carolina.
but it was
at all.
you could there was that undercurrent of the dirty South that was in there, and they were like, we're Carolina boys. They kept on you know talking about the fact that they're Carolina boys.
I think their interludes really promoted that they were Carolina boys. Like the conversations, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But their style and their production to me was very New York.
Yeah, and I think there was I can't remember the name of the track, but Big Daddy Kane said like, damn, I found New York in the South. Like, you know, and I was like, that just kind of just flowed into that. I was like, okay, that was cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to throw out? Random thoughts in terms of hip hop? This is
You know what, dude? The list made me realize whenever it's a song that makes me amp or want to beat something or pump something out, it's Jay-Z.
I was just gonna say, in terms of your spin classes,
Yes.
what would have been?
Well, and it's interesting because it depended on the audience. When my say spinners customers were mostly white, I would put in my J, but PSA, and you know, I would try to like talk over when he's saying the N word, and because and I knew the timing perfectly well, but he's still that he gets you up out of your seat. And so even like I used to have I have a weights playlist and I have a cardio playlist. He is littered through my weights playlist. Him and T-Pain and Auto-Tune. I don't know why, but but I could not answer that Auto-Tune song, which is interesting. I wasn't comfortable trying to answer that question because it's like I don't like Auto-Tune in hip hop. It's just T-Pain singing. I don't want to hear a rapper.
Okay, we've gone too deep now, and probably people have just turned off this. Anyway, so this is cool. I hope you have a great 420.
Thank you.
So thanks, guys, for signing. I hope that, you know, with the first part, you know, I think it was a really important thing in terms of awareness, and I really wanted to talk about it. I'm gonna have to probably let my people know that I had this conversation before it gets posted, just to say FYI, all our business out in the streets. But I think they would appreciate it in terms of knowing that something could possibly be coming out of it. And I think the levity part in terms of the hip hop piece was good because you shown your depth in terms of your hip hop or your range. In terms of hip hop.
You didn't talk about Your Loves enough because I noticed you didn't talk about Return of the Mac. How are you going to go through a whole discussion and never bring up that song? Because you torture Shalice and I about it.
I can't. The whole point of this was for us to have a meeting, discuss the stuff. And look, I like the song.
So and where does it fit in all of this?
It fits as we will have to have a reboot with Shalice of I don't dance a lot, I don't go on the floor a lot, but what are the songs that'll get me on the floor? What are the songs that would get me to pull my girlfriend on the floor and say, let's go? We can talk about that one. And yeah, so that could be one.
Stay tuned.
Yes. So thank you very much for signing in for another week. I just want to say to my India crew, you've now taken over Canada and the US as my biggest listener base. So shout out, braps, big up India, big up. And I'm going to start looking at the cities and then start shouting out the cities because I think we're going to be huge over there. So anyway, thank you very much for another week, Chris, Jamie. Thank you. 1990 Studios it's where it's at. And for another week, signing off. See y'all later.